There is a specific quality to a sensory organ that most people never think about until it fails. A hawk does not hunt with its wings, it hunts with its eyes. The wings only carry it to where the eyes have already decided to go. Cut the eyes and the wings flap toward nothing, or worse, toward the wrong thing entirely. Every advanced weapon system built in the last 50 years follows this same unforgiving logic. The missile is not the weapon, the missile is the wing. The weapon, the real irreplaceable core of the system, is the eye that finds the target before anything is ever fired. And right now, across the southern front and the occupied peninsula of Crimea, Ukraine is going after the eyes. Ukraine just blinded Russia's air shield. Not all of it, not everywhere, but enough. In enough places. With enough regularity that Russia's most advanced surface-to-air system, the S-400 Triumph, is losing its coverage in visible, mapped, confirmed patches. Before this goes any further, a clarification has to be made, because this claim gets thrown around loosely by commentators who don't know the difference between a headline and a system diagram. This is not the metaphorical sense in which people say a country has been blinded when one general gets caught off guard or one embarrassing leak makes the news. That version of the word is cheap. It's content, not analysis. This is the literal operational sense. Specific radar installations tied to specific S-400 battalions positioned to cover specific stretches of sky have been struck, damaged, or destroyed, and Ukraine's own general staff has published the names, the locations, and in several cases the dates. This is not a vibe. This is a target list with a body count of machines. So let's build the mechanism piece by piece, because if you don't understand how an integrated air defense network actually works, none of this will land the way it should, the eye and the fist. An S-400 system is not one thing. It is a network of things pretending to be one thing. There is the launcher, the missile tubes, the part that gets photographed, the part people picture when they hear S-400. And then there is the radar, the 96L6, the Nebo, the Protivnik-GE, the Parol identification system. Nobody photographs the radar. It doesn't look like a weapon. It looks like a truck with an antenna bolted to the roof. But the radar is the part that matters. Without it, the launcher is a fist swinging in the dark. It can still hurt something eventually by accident, but it cannot see, cannot track, cannot tell a decoy from a cruise missile, cannot hand a target off to the next battery down the chain. Kill the radar and you haven't disabled one weapon. You've cut the nerve that the entire kill chain depends on. This is why Ukraine's campaign isn't really a campaign against S-400 launchers. It's a campaign against the eyes that feed them, and the difference matters because launchers are, to some degree, replaceable in the near term. Russia has stockpiles, years of production behind it. Radars, especially the specialized ones, are not so easy. They take longer to build, longer to calibrate, and there are far fewer of them relative to the launchers they support. The eye is rarer than the fist, so the eye is the target, north, south, east, west. The map of the wound. Look at where these strikes have actually landed according to Ukraine's own reporting, and a pattern starts to draw itself across the map like a wound that keeps reopening in new places. Start in occupied Crimea near the village of Zaporizhzhia. In mid-April, a Nebo-SVU radar, a system built specifically to detect stealth aircraft and other low observable threats, was reportedly struck as part of a coordinated wave of attacks that Ukraine's general staff described as hitting air defense, logistics, and troop concentrations all at once. One eye closed. The map moves east into Zaporizhzhia region near Krasnoyarsk. That same mid-April operation reportedly struck a 96L6 radar, the specific radar variant that serves as the all-altitude detector for an entire S-400 battery. Not a launcher, not a truck full of missiles. The detector itself. Another eye closed. Move back to March near the village of Lubidnikivka in occupied Crimea. Here it wasn't one radar, it was two. The 59N6-E Protivnik radar built to track aircraft, cruise missiles, and ballistic targets at high altitude, and beside it, the 73E6 Parol identification radar, the system that tells a battery whether an incoming contact is friend or foe. Take that away, and even a battery that can still see has to guess who it's looking at. Ukraine's general staff reported striking an S-400 launcher in that same operation. Radar blinded, identification blinded, launcher hit, 3 wounds, 1 night. Days earlier, near Primorsk, open-source reporting pointed to significant damage on the Valdai radar, another long-range surveillance asset feeding the same regional picture. Now the map jumps north out of Crimea entirely into Tula region, deep inside Russia itself, not the occupied territories. By late March, a Ukrainian strike reportedly disabled a mobile S-400 Triumph launcher there, a system nominally capable, according to reporting on the strike, of engaging close to 100 targets simultaneously, disabled not by a rival missile system, disabled by the kind of low-cost strike drone that costs a rounding error compared to what it destroyed. And the map ends, for now, at Kerch, the strait connecting occupied Crimea to Russia proper. In late June, Ukraine's security service reported drones striking weapons and a radar station belonging to the S-400 battery covering that exact choke point. Timed, officials said, to a broader 40-day operation across Crimea personally authorized by President Zelensky days earlier. This is not a single dramatic night, not a hero strike, not a one-time viral clip. This is what Ukraine's own Unmanned Systems Forces, a branch of the military created in June 2025 specifically for this kind of deep patient targeting, describe as sustained attrition. By their own count, 194 elements of Russia's integrated air defense network struck since the start of 2026 alone, including 31 in June. Since the branch's founding a year ago, 276 total, radar stations, missile systems, self-propelled guns, electronic warfare assets. Separately, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense reported at least 25 major air defense and radar systems hit in April alone, with radars including the 96L6 tied to the S-400, forming the largest single category. None of these numbers should be treated as a final, independently audited tally. They come from Ukrainian military sources, and Ukrainian military sources have an obvious interest in advertising success. But the pattern, across separate regions, separate dates, named and technically specific hardware, corroborated by multiple independent outlets, is not something to wave away as pure messaging either. Analysts tracking the trend agree the significance isn't any one strike, it's the accumulation. Tomasz Nagy, an air defense expert at the security research group Globsec, has pointed out that once enough tactical successes stack up, the effect stops being tactical. It becomes operational. One radar is a loss. A dozen radars, in a pattern, across a season, is a shrinking shield. First, second, third. How Moscow answers stage 1 looks like silence. A ministry statement that mentions intercepted drones but never mentions the radar those drones were flying toward. Based on the observable pattern of past Russian institutional behavior, and this next part is reasoned projection, not confirmed internal policy, the first move tends to be narrative minimization, not a denial exactly, an omission. Silence functions as its own kind of damage control. Stage 2 looks like a truck moving at night. Short-range systems, the Pantsir S-1, the Buk, the Tor, get repositioned to plug the gaps a lost long-range radar leaves behind. These systems can shoot down something. What they cannot do is replicate the detection range and altitude coverage of a dedicated S-400 radar. It is the military equivalent of covering a punctured eye with a bandage and calling it sight. Stage 3 looks like a factory trying to outrun a calendar it cannot win. An escalated effort, accelerated production, faster fielding, that by the nature of manufacturing timelines tends to underdeliver against whatever schedule Moscow claims. A replacement radar takes months to build and calibrate under normal conditions, under sanctions, under a wartime economy already stretched thin producing artillery shells and drones at scale. That timeline does not shrink, it stretches. If the pace of Ukrainian strikes, dozens of confirmed air defense hits a month on Ukraine's own accounting, keeps outrunning Russia's capacity to replace what's lost, the gap does not close, it compounds. Again, nobody outside Russia's Ministry of Defense knows the exact production timeline for a 96L6 or a Nebo radar. This is analysis of a pattern, not a leaked memo. But the logic of industrial attrition under war conditions is not new, and it does not require inside access to project forward. The human cost beneath the map. It would be easy to talk about all of this the way a chess commentator talks about a board, radars as pieces, coverage gaps as captured squares, but behind every strike and every gap it opens are people who are not abstractions. On March 14th, While Ukraine's forces were reportedly striking radar systems and an S-400 launcher in occupied Crimea, Russian forces struck a residential area in Zaporizhzhia with guided aerial bombs. One man was killed. 19 people were injured, including a 17-year-old boy left in serious condition. 2 people were pulled from beneath rubble by emergency workers. This is not a separate story from the air defense campaign. It's the same war, seen from ground level instead of a radar map. Every gap opened in a network is, in theory, a gap that might someday let a future strike through more easily. But Russian strikes on Ukrainian cities have continued through this entire period regardless. Technical successes on one side of the map do not pause the war on the other. Families in Zaporizhzhia go to sleep uncertain whether their building will still be standing by morning, whichever radar in Crimea did or didn't survive the night. And on the other side of the line, the soldiers manning these positions, many conscripted, many far from anywhere resembling home, are the ones absorbing these strikes directly. Whatever judgment history renders on this war, the operator inside a struck radar truck is not a chess piece either. The fear in that moment is exactly as real as anyone else's. The eyes going dark are made of glass and circuitry. The cost underneath them is not. Step back from Crimea, from Zaporizhzhia, from this radar and that launcher. There's an older lesson underneath all of it, one that predates this war by decades. Every major air campaign since at least the 1991 Gulf War has opened with the same doctrine. Before strike aircraft enter contested skies, you suppress or destroy the enemy's ability to see and track them. SEAD, suppression of enemy air defenses, has been a foundational pillar of Western air doctrine for a generation, and it goes back further still. In 1982, during the Lebanon War, Israeli forces executed one of the most decisive SAM suppression operations in modern military history over the Bekaa Valley, using electronic warfare, decoys, and precision strikes to dismantle Syria's Soviet-supplied air defense network in a matter of days, a campaign still studied in staff colleges as a textbook case of blinding a network before engaging it directly. What Ukraine is running is a version of that same doctrine, adapted for a war fought without air superiority, executed not by stealth aircraft and specialized jamming platforms, but by cheap disposable drones and long-range cruise missiles like the SCALP. That substitution should unsettle military planners well beyond this war. It suggests that some of the most expensive, most sophisticated air defense architecture on the planet, systems the Kremlin marketed for years as a deterrent nearly impossible to penetrate, can be worn down not by an equally expensive counter-system, but by mass-produced drones costing a fraction of what they destroy. That's not a story about the S-400 specifically, it's a story about the economics of modern war, and it's a lesson that will outlast this conflict entirely. Ukraine did not blind Russia's air shield in one strike, one night, one headline. It has been doing it radar by radar, truck by truck, region by region, Zaporizhzhia, Crimea, Tula, Kerch, each strike small on its own, each one part of a pattern that added together looks less like incidental loss and more like structural damage. The shield is not gone, but it is shrinking, and the eyes it depends on are being closed faster, it appears, than Russia can currently reopen them. So here's the question worth sitting with and worth arguing about in the comments. Is this the beginning of a genuine structural collapse in Russia's integrated air defense, the kind that reshapes what's possible in this war's skies? Or is it a painful but survivable rate of attrition that Russia's industrial base will eventually absorb and outlast? Make your case. I want the argument, not just the answer.